Think about the last time you were online, like just casually browsing. Let's say you were looking for a new pair of hiking boots.
Right, something super mundane.
Exactly, just killing time.
Yeah.
So maybe you clicked on a link on Amazon, hovered over a picture of some, heavy-duty trail shoes for a few seconds. Maybe you read a couple of reviews, and then you just closed the tab. You didn't even buy anything.
Which happens all the time.
All the time. But then the next time you open your social media feed, it is just absolutely flooded with highly specific ads from REI and Carhartt and Timberland.
Yeah, they find you immediately.
It's almost creepy, right? You scroll past them, you go read an article on a completely different website, and suddenly the sidebar is packed with ads for hiking backpacks and moisture-wicking socks and camping gear.
It's relentless.
It really is. Every single click, every second you spend hovering over an image, it's all being recorded. But here is the terrifying part, or maybe the fascinating part. Amazon isn't just guessing what you want based on that one single click.
No, not at all. It's much deeper than that.
Their servers are running like billions of predictive what-if scenarios every single second. And they're basing it on your scroll speed, your exact location, your past purchasing history.
Everything is a data point.
Right. So with billions of people generating massive, almost incomprehensible amounts of data every single minute of every single day, how do companies actually capture, make sense of, and, respond to this avalanche of information in real time without just completely drowning in it?
Well, I mean, it is arguably the defining business challenge of our entire era, because having mountains of data is completely useless. In fact, it's actually a massive liability if an organization cannot structurally organize it, analyze it, and act on it faster than their competitors.
Which is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking a really massive stack of research, primarily leaning on the latest management frameworks from Richard Tedmon and Casey Wilhelm in their 2026 textbook, Connect Master, Management Information Systems.
It's a fantastic resource.
It really is. And we are diving deep into Module 7 today, which focuses entirely on business management systems. And I do want to note right off the bat that we are tailoring today's deep dive specifically for the students of the Dr. Sampak College of Business at Tarleton State University.
Go Texans.
Yeah. Along with any working professionals out there who realize that understanding the mechanics of business data is just, it's no longer optional.
Absolutely not. It's mandatory for survival now.
Right. But before we get into the heavy machinery of how a business actually processes all this information, we really need to bridge a crucial gap. Because in our last deep dive into Module 6, we spent a lot of time unpacking computer networks and the internet.
Right, the infrastructure side of things.
Exactly. We explored the architecture of PANs, LANs, WANs, TCP/IP protocols, the cloud, and 5G connectivity.
Which was really essential foundational knowledge. We were essentially looking at the physical and logical, well, the plumbing of the digital world.
Yeah.
The fiber optic cables, the routers, the cell towers, the literal infrastructure that connects a smartphone in a coffee shop to a massive server farm out in the desert.
But here's the disconnect that I think a lot of people have. The network provides the pathways for the data to travel, and the cloud provides the storage.
Yes.
That's the plumbing and the reservoir. But a business actually needs a brain to process what is flowing through those pipes. The network just delivers the raw information. If you just let it pile up in a database somewhere, you aren't doing business. You're just hoarding data.
Yeah, you're just paying for storage at that point.
Exactly. So today's topic, business management systems, or BMS, is that brain. It is the complex software architecture that tells a business how to organize, analyze, and act on that raw information so it can survive.
And if we look at the historical evolution of management, a manager used to be someone who simply oversaw human labor and physical resources, like literally watching people work on an assembly line.
Right, very analog.
Very analog. But today, a modern manager is fundamentally an information processor. Their primary job is taking in data, synthesizing it, and making decisions. But, and this is the crux of it, the sheer volume and velocity of data arriving through those modern 5G networks is just totally beyond human cognitive capacity.
Oh, yeah. There's no way a person can track all that.
Right. A human mind cannot process 10,000 daily sales transactions to find a hidden demographic trend. They simply cannot do it without highly advanced technological assistance. And that assistance is exactly what a business management system provides.
Which is why mastering the mechanics of a BMS is essentially the dividing line between being a standard replaceable employee who just follows processes and becoming a strategic business leader who actually designs the future of the company.
It's the ultimate leverage.
Definitely. And hey, before we really get into the weeds of how these systems operate, if you guys are finding these deep dives helpful for your coursework or your career, please take a quick second to like, subscribe, follow, share, and leave a comment on whatever platform you are listening on right now.
It really does help us out.
It does. Subscribing ensures you won't miss any of the upcoming modules we're tackling, and it genuinely helps us keep bringing you the deep analytical content you need to stay sharp.
Yeah, it takes just a moment, but it allows us to continue unpacking these complex frameworks week after week.
Okay, so let's start with the why. Why are we talking about massive multi-million-dollar business management systems right now? Like, why can't a medium-sized business just run its operations on a bunch of disconnected Excel spreadsheets like they did 20 years ago?
I mean, some still try, and it usually ends in disaster.
Right. So to understand the urgency of why we need this software, we have to look at a concept from over 60 years ago. Gordon Moore, who co-founded Intel, made an observation that became famously known as Moore's Law.
And Moore's Law is basically a foundational principle of modern technology. Back in 1965, Moore observed that the number of transistors that could fit on a microchip was doubling approximately every 18 to 24 months.
Okay, let's break that down for a second. What exactly does that mean for the computing power?
Well, a transistor is basically a microscopic switch that controls the flow of electricity. The more switches you have, the faster and more powerfully the computer can process information. What makes Moore's Law so profound is that this exponential curve of doubling computing power has held remarkably true for decades.
Okay, so computing power is doubling constantly. I understand the consumer side of this completely. Like,
Yeah.
I buy a top-of-the-line smartphone, and out of the box, it feels like a supercomputer.
Oh yeah, everything is lightning fast.
But then, like, 3 years later, it's lagging, the apps are crashing, the battery is dying by noon. It feels like this technology has a built-in, ridiculously short lifespan.
And that's not just your imagination, that's Moore's Law in action.
Right, because software developers know that the hardware is getting exponentially better, so they write much heavier, more demanding software. My 3-year-old phone simply doesn't have the processing power to run the new software efficiently anymore.
Exactly. Now, take that exact consumer frustration you have with your phone and scale it up to an enterprise level. For a massive business, this isn't just an annoyance where your apps load slowly. It is a massive, recurring, and largely unavoidable capital expenditure.
Because they have to buy new servers constantly.
Yes. Because hardware capabilities are doubling, enterprise software developers are constantly releasing much more sophisticated management software that can run deeper analytics, handle more data, and provide better security.
I see where this is going. If my company is running a server rack we bought, say, 5 years ago, those servers are practically ancient history in the context of Moore's Law.
Precisely. Older devices and older servers quickly become obsolete. They literally cannot handle the processing demands of modern business management systems.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot run a cutting-edge 2026 AI-driven inventory management platform on hardware from 2018. It will choke.
It'll just crash.
Right. Therefore, a modern manager has to constantly budget for the fact that the underlying IT infrastructure, the very tools the company relies on to function, will require continuous, expensive upgrades just to maintain parity with the competition. It is literally the cost of doing business in a data-driven world.
That sets the stage perfectly. The hardware is a moving target, but the software is what actually does the heavy lifting. Now, Tedmon and Wilhelm define a business management system as a framework to increase management efficiency using technology. And they break down every BMS into 3 core components.
And it's important to note that if any of these 3 are missing, the system collapses.
Okay, let's go through them. The first component is the database management system, or DBMS. This is the foundation. The text says it accepts input, verifies it, stores it, and classifies it. But I want to push back on this a little bit. When I hear database management system, I just picture a glorified digital filing cabinet. Is it really that complex?
Yeah, the digital filing cabinet analogy is incredibly common, but it severely underestimates what a modern DBMS actually does. A filing cabinet is passive, right? You throw a piece of paper in a folder and it just sits there until you manually go look for it.
Yeah, exactly.
But a DBMS is highly active. It doesn't just hold data. It structurally enforces how that data relates to everything else in the system.
Okay, so if the data is, let's say, a massive chaotic library of unorganized books just dumped on the floor, the DBMS isn't just the wooden bookshelf. It's more like a highly aggressive, magical librarian who not only builds the shelves but instantly hands you the exact paragraph you need when you ask a question and actively prevents people from putting books in the wrong section.
That is a much, much more accurate way to look at it. Let's talk about data integrity, for example, which is a core function of the DBMS. If an employee tries to enter a text-based name into a field meant for a numerical date of birth, a simple filing system might just accept it.
And then your data is ruined.
Right. But a DBMS will instantly reject it and verify the formatting before it ever allows the data to be stored. This is critical because it ensures the data hasn't been corrupted. It allows for complex relational queries like pulling up all customers over the age of 30 who bought a specific product in a specific zip code during the month of July.
Which you couldn't do with a physical filing cabinet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the DBMS doesn't rigorously organize and verify that foundational data, the next two higher-level systems we are going to discuss are completely blind. They have absolutely nothing to work with.
That makes total sense. So the DBMS is the foundation. It ensures the data is clean, organized, and instantly accessible. That leads us to the second core component of a BMS, the Predictive Information System. And the text explains that this assists managers with handling possibilities, specifically running complex what-if scenarios.
Yeah, this is where we transition from merely storing data to actually leveraging it for strategic foresight. Business is inherently unpredictable, right? A manager's job is to plan for the unknown. Let's look at the concrete example provided by the source material, which is a medium-sized bathroom remodeling business.
I really want to dive into that because I think applying this to a tangible local business makes these abstract software concepts so much easier to grasp. So this bathroom remodeling business is doing well, but their entire profit margin relies on raw materials, lumber, tile, porcelain, and specifically copper piping.
Right, and the prices of those commodities fluctuate wildly based on global supply chains. A manager without a predictive information system might just guess at how a price increase will affect their business.
They just kind of go with their gut.
Exactly, which is dangerous. But a manager with a predictive information system can input a specific what-if scenario. What happens to our business if the wholesale cost of copper piping increases by 15% next quarter?
Now, my initial thought is, well, if copper goes up 15%, your costs go up, so your overall profits go down. But it's not a flat, even hit across the board, is it?
Not at all. And that is the exact blind spot the predictive system illuminates. A 15% increase in copper doesn't affect a simple, half-bath powder room remodel the same way it affects a massive master bathroom addition that requires completely relocating major plumbing lines.
Ah, I see. The software runs the math across the entire operation. It looks at the historical data from the DBMS, how much copper is actually used in each type of project, the labor hours associated with cutting and installing it, the current profit margins on those specific jobs.
It handles all those complex contingencies. It might reveal that while standard remodels will only see, say, a 2% dip in profit margin, the high-end luxury remodels that utilize extensive custom plumbing will suddenly become completely unprofitable at their current, quote, prices.
Wow.
Yeah, the system shows the manager the precise hidden ripple effects of that single variable changing across their entire supply chain and service catalog.
Which is an incredible tool.
Yeah.
It literally allows you to see the future before it happens. But the predictive system just shows you the possibilities. It just says, if X happens, then Y is the result. Which brings us to the third and most advanced component of a business management system, the decision-making information system.
Right. This is the apex of the BMS structure. It integrates the clean, verified data from the DBMS with a complex scenario modeling from the predictive information system. But it goes a step further. It provides statistical analyses of the likely outcomes, and crucially, it often recommends a specific course of action.
That is the kicker right there. It doesn't just hand the manager a report saying, hey, if copper goes up 15%, you are going to lose money on master bathroom.
No, it's proactive.
It actually says, because there is a high statistical probability of copper increasing by 15%, the system recommends increasing the base, quote, formula on all master bathroom models by 4.2% starting immediately and steering current clients toward alternative fixture finishes.
It does the heavy analytical lifting that a human mind simply cannot do fast enough. Now, it is really vital to understand that the system does not make the final decision. The human manager still has to review the recommendation and actually pull the trigger.
Right. The computer isn't running the company completely.
Exactly. But the decision-making information system provides a mathematically sound roadmap based on the entirety of the company's data.
Okay, so we understand what the BMS does. It's the brain. It stores, it predicts, and it recommends. But here is the massive logistical hurdle every company faces. Where does this brain actually live? Because deciding that you need a BMS is the easy part. Figuring out how to deploy and house it is an entirely different nightmare.
And nightmare is often the most appropriate word. Tedmon and Wilhelm are very clear that transitioning to a new business management system is deeply painful. It always brings short-term stress, massive internal resistance, and a temporary decrease in overall productivity.
But why is it always so painful? I mean, if the software is supposed to make things more efficient, why does productivity actually drop?
Because you are dealing with a collision of human and technical issues simultaneously. Technically, you have to integrate this massive new software architecture with legacy systems that might be, decades old. Data migration alone is a monumental task, literally moving millions of records from an old system to a new DBMS without corrupting them.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
It is. But the human element is even harder. You have to retrain your entire workforce. People naturally resist change, especially when the new system forces them to abandon workflows they have used for years. The manager's most difficult job is guiding the organization through that valley of despair, ensuring that the long-term efficiency gains eventually outweigh the severe short-term pain of implementation.
And a huge part of minimizing that pain is choosing the right deployment strategy. Where are the actual computers that run this software going to sit? The text gives us three main options: on-premises, cloud-based, and software as a service, or SaaS. Let's break these down, starting with option A, on-premises deployment.
With an on-premises system, the organization physically buys all the necessary hardware. They buy the massive servers, the cooling racks, the backup generators, and they physically install them in a server room inside their own corporate building.
Wow.
Yeah. They also purchase the software licenses and install the software directly onto their own physical machines.
That sounds incredibly expensive up front. What is the benefit of doing that in 2026 when the cloud exists? Why buy a server?
Absolute granular control.
Yeah.
When the servers are in your booming, you have complete organizational sovereignty over your data and your systems. You can heavily customize the software to meet the highly specific, unique needs of your business. If you need to make a sudden, radical change to the system architecture, you don't have to ask a third-party vendor for permission. You just tell your internal IT team to do it.
Okay, I see.
For organizations dealing with highly sensitive data, like certain defense contractors or massive financial institutions, that physical control is paramount.
But the cons are pretty severe. As you mentioned, the implementation costs are astronomical because you are buying all that hardware before you even turn the system on. Furthermore, you have to hire and, more importantly, retain a team of highly qualified, specialized IT professionals to run it. If a server crashes at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, it is your team that has to drive to the office and fix it.
Right, there's no one else to call.
The entire burden of cybersecurity, maintenance, and hardware upgrades falls squarely on your shoulders.
Which is exactly why the vast majority of standard businesses look to option B, cloud-based deployment. Specifically, models known as infrastructure as a service, which is IaaS, or platform as a service, PaaS.
Let's clarify what that means for the listeners. In this model, you aren't buying physical servers. You are renting the hardware infrastructure from a massive provider like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud.
Correct. The servers are located in a massive data center hundreds of miles away, and you access them over the internet. The pros here are significant. First and foremost is scalability. If your business experiences a sudden massive spike in data processing needs, say during the holiday shopping season, you don't have to go order physical machines and wait weeks for delivery.
You just click a button.
Exactly. You click a button and spin up more virtual servers instantly. When the rush is over, you scale back down and stop paying for the extra computing power.
And you get the benefit of world-class security. Amazon Web Services employs thousands of the best cybersecurity experts on the planet. A mid-sized bathroom remodeling company could never afford that level of protection on their own. Plus, there is almost zero physical hardware required on-site, saving massive amounts of physical space and electricity.
However, the trade-off is the loss of total control. The manager loses some control over the ongoing monthly operational costs, which can fluctuate unpredictably based on how much data the company processes. Furthermore, you are entirely at the mercy of the host regarding the underlying infrastructure.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if Microsoft Azure decides to update a core protocol that temporarily disrupts your specific customized software, you just have to deal with it. You don't own the sandbox.
Which leads us to option C, which takes the cloud concept even further. Software as a service, or SaaS.
Right. With SaaS, you aren't just renting the underlying hardware. The third-party vendor hosts the hardware, the operating system, and the actual software application itself. You, the user, simply log in via a web browser. Think of massive enterprise platforms like Salesforce for customer management or Microsoft 365 for basic office productivity.
The pros for SaaS are incredibly appealing for a business manager. The third-party vendor handles all the software updates, all the bug fixes, and all the compliance updates. If a new data privacy law is passed, Salesforce updates their system globally, and you are instantly compliant without having to write a single line of code yourself.
It's totally hands-off.
Yeah, and there are minimal upfront costs because you are typically just paying a monthly or annual subscription fee per user.
But the major drawback is that SaaS is generally rigid. It is significantly less customizable than an on-premises or IaaS solution. Because the vendor is providing the exact same software architecture to thousands of different companies simultaneously, you generally have to take the software as it is given.
You can't tinker with the engine.
No, not at all. You might be able to change some basic interface colors or add custom data fields, but you cannot fundamentally alter how the core software operates. You have to adapt your business processes to fit the software, rather than adapting the software to fit your business.
You know, I was trying to come up with a way to visualize these 3 deployment strategies while reading the chapter. Tell me if this analogy holds up.
Let's hear it.
Choosing an on-premises system is like deciding to build and own a fully custom house. You get to design every single room, you can paint the walls whatever color you want, and you have total privacy. But when the roof leaks in a rainstorm, you are the one climbing up the ladder in the dark to fix it, and you have to pay for the materials.
That's incredibly accurate. And the cloud-based IaaS option.
IaaS is like renting an unfurnished apartment in a high-rise luxury building. The landlord, Amazon or Microsoft handles the building's structural integrity, the plumbing, and the security guard at the front desk. You don't have to worry about the building collapsing. But you still have to bring all your own furniture, set up the interior however you want, and manage your own day-to-day life inside that empty box.
I like that a lot. The underlying structure is provided, but the operational environment is still yours to build.
Exactly. And finally, the SaaS model is like checking into a fully furnished, all-inclusive luxury hotel suite. You don't have to clean the room, the security is handled at the front desk, and they even put a mint on your pillow. You just show up and start living. But you absolutely cannot knock down a wall to make the bathroom bigger, and you can't swap out the bed for a different model. You have to live within the exact confines of what the hotel provides.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the deployment strategies. The manager essentially has to decide, do we need a custom house, an unfurnished apartment, or a hotel suite? And that decision dictates the entire IT budget and strategy for the next decade.
Okay, so we've got the brain built, and we know what kind of building it lives in. Now we need to look at what this massive system actually manages on a day-to-day basis. We are moving into specific types of management software, starting with the most critical component of any organization: human resource management, or HRM systems.
Which is huge, because any successful executive will readily admit that employees are an organization's most vital and often most expensive asset. But managing hundreds or thousands of human beings at scale introduces immense logistical complexity and increasingly massive legal liability.
I really loved the historical context the textbook provided here, because we often think of HR as a super modern invention. But the text points out that human resource management has literally existed since the dawn of recorded history. Archaeologists have found Egyptian hieroglyphics that detail how specific scribes and priests were dedicated entirely to organizing the massive workforces required for agricultural projects and monument building. They were tracking labor hours on stone tablets.
It's wild to think about. The fundamental need to organize human labor, track productivity, and manage compensation hasn't changed in 5,000 years.
Yeah.
Only the tools have changed.
Right.
In the late 19th century, during the Industrial Revolution, we saw the introduction of physical time clocks and punch cards to track hourly factory workers. But the real technological leap occurred in the 1970s with the development of massive mainframe computer software. Systems like SAP, which remains one of the dominant enterprise software giants today, were originally developed during that era specifically to help massive multinational corporations handle the sheer mathematical weight of their payroll and HR datasets.
And today, keeping track of HR on paper, or even on simple disconnected spreadsheets, is basically organizational suicide. The scale is just too big, and government oversight and changing labor legislation are way too complex. The source material breaks modern HRM systems down into a few core categories. I want to unpack the first one in detail: recruiting and hiring management systems.
Right. And the common misconception here is that recruiting software is just a digital bulletin board where you post a job ad and collect resumes. It is so much deeper than that. Advanced HRM systems are fundamentally predictive. They're designed to forecast future workforce needs based on shifting environmental variables.
Meaning they look ahead.
Exactly. An industry might be booming today, but if the technology shifts in 5 years, the company will need employees with an entirely different skill set.
The text gives a really brilliant, incredibly concrete example of this using a regional airline. I want us to walk through the exact variables this airline's HR director is facing because it perfectly illustrates why a human brain cannot do this alone.
I agree, it's a perfect case study. Let's look at the shifting external and internal factors this HR director has to synthesize. First, there is a historical trend. This regional airline has historically relied heavily on hiring former military pilots who have finished their service. But the military is fundamentally changing how it operates, utilizing more drones and downsizing its traditional pilot training programs.
Oh, wow. So there are just fewer pilots coming out.
Exactly. Therefore, that primary reliable pool of applicants is rapidly shrinking.
Okay, so variable one, supply of new talent is dropping. Second variable, the airline's customer demand is rapidly increasing. People want to fly more. Furthermore, because corporate interest rates are currently low, the airline's executive board has decided to leverage that cheap debt and purchase a fleet of new aircraft. More planes in the sky means they desperately need to hire more pilots to fly them.
So we have a shrinking supply of talent, colliding with a massive increase in demand for talent. That's hard enough. But then we introduce a third, incredibly disruptive variable: regulatory changes. The Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, recently changed the rules and raised the mandatory retirement age for commercial airline pilots from 60 to 65.
Oh, man. Let's pause and think about the math required here. You have a shrinking military talent pool, meaning fewer rookies are available. You are buying more planes, meaning you need to expand your total workforce quickly. But T, your current veteran pilots, who you thought were going to retire this year, can now legally continue flying for 5 extra years, which suddenly increases your retention rate and delays the need to replace them.
Exactly. Now imagine being a human HR director trying to sit down with a calculator and a spreadsheet to figure out exactly how many new pilots you need to recruit, hire, and put through a costly multi-month training program over the next 36 months.
It's impossible.
It really is. If you hire too many, you have pilots sitting in the break room getting paid to do nothing, destroying your profit margins. If you hire too few, you have brand new multi-million-dollar airplanes sitting empty on the tarmac, bleeding revenue.
It's just an impossible math problem for a human. There are way too many moving timelines, which is exactly why the HRM predictive software is essential. The system doesn't just look at today's numbers, it mathematically models the attrition rate, meaning the exact speed at which current pilots will age out or leave against the acquisition rate, factoring in the time delay of training new recruits.
Right, it overlaps all those curves.
Yeah, it runs those intersecting curves and gives the HR director a highly precise recruiting target for each quarter over the next 5 years.
It takes chaos and turns it into a strategic roadmap. Now, once you have hired those employees, you have to manage them. Which brings us to the next category: compensation and benefits management software.
See, this feels like it should be simpler, just cutting checks, but the text implies it's actually a complete minefield.
Compensation strategy is one of the most delicate levers a manager can pull. If compensation is deemed inappropriate, or worse, structurally inconsistent across departments, it will rapidly demotivate even your most dedicated workforce.
People talk. They find out what others make.
They absolutely do. So the software ensures accurate, mathematically equitable tracking of hourly wages, salary bands, commission structures, and performance bonuses.
And the benefit side is arguably even more complex than the payroll side. You aren't just tracking a dollar amount. You are tracking employee hiring dates to determine exactly when they become eligible for 401k match. You are tracking changes in their marital status, the birth of dependents for health coverage, and the specific choices each employee makes during open enrollment regarding tiered health plans or life insurance.
It's a massive amount of personal data.
And all of this has to be perfectly aligned with state and federal tax codes.
Which is why the source material specifically highlights the rise of SaaS solutions in this space. Companies like Zenefits and Benefit Focus have become massive because they shoulder the burden of compliance. Labor laws, Tax codes and healthcare regulations change constantly.
You'd need an army of lawyers to keep up.
Right. If a company tries to manage that on an on-premises system, their IT team has to constantly rewrite the software to stay legal. By using a SaaS vendor, the vendor updates the core software the minute a new law passes, ensuring that the thousands of companies using their platform remain legally compliant without having to lift a finger.
That compliance aspect ties directly into the final HR category the text covers: employee evaluation management software. Now, performance reviews are universally dreaded by everyone involved.
Oh, nobody likes them.
Right, but the text argues that tracking performance through a centralized system is absolutely vital for two distinct reasons.
The first reason is motivational. Employees need to know where they stand. An equitable, transparent, data-driven means of ranking performance encourages high achievers and clearly identifies areas where struggling employees need more training.
But the second reason is pure legal protection for the company, and this is where the system really proves its worth. The text notes that many states require significant, formally documented evidence of substandard performance over a period of time prior to any demotion or dismissal.
This is a critical point for any future manager listening. If you fire an employee for chronic poor performance, but you've been doing your evaluations verbally or scribbling them on random pieces of paper that get lost, you have zero proof.
It's just your word against theirs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When that employee inevitably sues the company for wrongful termination, the company is completely exposed to massive legal liability.
So the HRM evaluation system acts as a forced compliance mechanism. It literally forces managers to sit down at regular intervals, input specific performance metrics, and generate a time-stamped, legally defensible paper trail.
Exactly. It turns subjective human judgment into an objective historical data set that protects the organization.
All right, so the BMS has managed the people. The workforce is hired, paid, and evaluated. Now we need to look at what the business actually does. We are moving into the management of physical goods and the people who buy them. Let's unpack inventory management systems first.
Managing inventory is a high-stakes, constant balancing act between two terrible extremes. On one side, you have overstocking. If a manager gets paranoid and orders too much product, they tie up massive amounts of the company's liquid capital in physical boxes sitting in a warehouse.
Just collecting dust.
Right. That is money that cannot be used for marketing or research.
Yeah.
Furthermore, they risk the inventory becoming obsolete, like last year's smartphone cases, meaning they will eventually have to sell it at a massive loss just to clear warehouse space.
But the other extreme is just as bad, if not worse, right? Understocking. If you try to run too lean and run out of a product, you instantly lose revenue because you can't fulfill customer orders. But the hidden cost is the reputational damage.
Which is huge.
If a customer needs a product and you don't have it, they will go to your competitor. And once they experience the competitor's service, they might never come back to you. A single stockout can cost you a lifetime of customer revenue.
Finding the exact middle ground between those two extremes is impossible to do manually at scale. And it's fascinating to look at how the technology to solve this has evolved. The text highlights a major revolution in the 1970s with the invention of the Universal Product Code, or the UPC.
Which is just the standard black and white barcode we see on literally everything at the grocery store.
Right. Before the UPC, grocery stores had to shut down for days to have employees manually count every single can of soup on the shelf. The barcode allowed for instantaneous digital tracking of an item the moment it was scanned at the cash register. It updated the database in real time, which was revolutionary.
But scanning barcodes still requires a human to physically point a laser at every single item, which is why the text moves to the 1980s and the development of RFID, or radio frequency identification. This feels like the technology that actually made modern global supply chains possible.
It absolutely did. RFID was a paradigm shift. Instead of a printed barcode, RFID uses tiny, microchip-embedded tags attached to the products.
Okay, wait, I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this because it sounds like magic to me. How does a tiny tag on a pallet of T-shirts transmit data to a computer without a battery?
It is a brilliant piece of physics. Most supply chain RFID tags are passive. They don't have their own power source. When a pallet of goods drives through a warehouse door equipped with an RFID scanner, the scanner emits a specific radio wave.
Okay, so the scanner sends a wave out.
Yes. The tiny antenna inside the RFID tag catches that radio wave, and the energy from the wave itself briefly powers up the microchip just enough for it to broadcast its unique serial number back to the scanner.
Oh, wow. That is incredible. So the scanner's radio wave actually wakes up the chip and powers it, meaning a forklift can drive a pallet of 500 different items through a loading dock, and the system instantly registers every single item without a human ever touching them or scanning a barcode.
Exactly. It provides real-time, frictionless visibility of goods as they move globally from the manufacturer to the shipping container to the retail warehouse. And modern inventory management systems use that real-time data to focus heavily on inventory optimization.
Optimization. Let's define what that looks like in the software.
It's all about establishing highly accurate, automated reordering points. The system calculates the lead time, which is exactly how many days it takes for a new shipment to arrive from the supplier after an order is placed.
So it knows the shipping delay.
Right. It simultaneously monitors the current daily sales rate of that item. The software does the math and determines that, for example, when the warehouse drops to exactly 142 units, it will take exactly 12 days to sell out, which perfectly matches the 12-day lead time for the new shipment to arrive.
So the system triggers an automatic reorder at exactly 142 units, completely bypassing human hesitation. The shelves never go empty, but the warehouse never gets overstuffed with excess product. It's a perfectly calibrated machine.
And this level of optimization isn't just restricted to multi-billion-dollar corporations either. The text notes that there are highly accessible systems tailored for every tier of business. A small local retailer might use an add-on like QuickBooks Enterprise. If the owner is already using QuickBooks for their accounting, adding the inventory module is a seamless adoption that brings powerful data tracking to a small shop.
Right, lowering that barrier to entry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Larger, more complex manufacturing firms will graduate to massive enterprise platforms like Oracle NetSuite or the SAP module, which integrates the inventory data directly into the company's global financial reporting.
Okay, so the system has perfectly optimized the physical goods, but goods are completely useless without buyers. Which brings us to the other side of the coin, customer relationship management, or CRM systems.
The entire philosophy behind CRM software is rooted in a fundamental, unshakable rule of business. It is always mathematically cheaper to retain an existing customer than it is to acquire a brand new one.
Because acquiring a new one takes so much work.
Right, it requires expensive marketing, advertising, and sales outreach. Retaining a customer who already trusts you is highly profitable.
A CRM system's primary goal is to manage, track, and optimize every single interaction a firm has with its customer base. It's about building a ridiculously detailed profile. You start with the basic direct information, their email address, their physical address, their phone number, and their purchase history. But modern CRMs go much further than that. They pull in behavioral data, website browsing habits, and even social media activity.
Let's ground this abstract concept by returning to the Patio furniture store example from the source material. It perfectly illustrates how a CRM turns raw data into targeted sales.
I love this example. So Patio furniture is generally a large, expensive, and relatively infrequent purchase. People don't buy a new outdoor dining set every month.
Right, so a basic, poorly managed store might just send a generic 10% off email blast to every single person who ever walked in the door.
Just spamming everyone.
Exactly. It's inefficient and annoys most of the recipients. But a manager using a robust CRM takes a strategic approach. They use the system to identify their highest value customers, the specific individuals who previously purchased top-tier luxury patio sets.
So the CRM flags a customer. Let's call him John. John bought a $3,000 teakwood dining set last year. You know where John lives. But the CRM cross-references his profile with external behavioral data. The text suggests that the system can identify that John recently joined several social media groups dedicated to outdoor gardening, native wildlife landscaping, and high-end backyard design.
The CRM has now synthesized two distinct data points. John has a proven capacity to spend money on high-end outdoor products, and John is currently highly engaged in upgrading his backyard ecosystem.
Therefore, the manager uses the CRM to execute a hyper-customized marketing strategy. They don't send John a flyer for cheap plastic deck chairs. They target him with a personalized email and digital ad campaign, specifically highlighting high-end stone fire pits, weather-resistant outdoor gardening stations, and premium bird feeders.
And that is the power of the system. It maximizes the store's marketing return on investment because they aren't wasting advertising dollars on people who don't care. But just as importantly, it enhances John's experience as a customer. The marketing doesn't feel like spam. It feels like the store deeply understands his specific interests and is offering him exactly what he's currently looking for. It builds loyalty through relevance.
It's all about making the customer feel intimately known while efficiently driving targeted sales. It's really brilliant. All right, let's zoom out again. We have systems to manage the HR, the inventory, and the customers. But what about managing the actual work, the day-to-day grind of how things get done inside the office walls?
Right, the operations.
This brings us to the systems used for business process management and project management. And right out of the gate, we need to clearly differentiate between a process and a project because they're fundamentally different things that require entirely different software tools.
That distinction is critical. Let's define them. A process is an ongoing, repeated sequence of activities that an organization performs continuously. Processing payroll is a process. Fulfilling a customer order is a process. Handling a customer return is a process. They happen over and over again, ideally the exact same way every time.
And business process management, or BPM, is the methodology and software used to streamline those ongoing activities, entirely focused on preventing backlogs and eliminating inefficiencies. The text outlines a very rigorous 5-step methodology for implementing BPM. Let's unpack this sequence. Step 1 is design.
In the design step, business analysts examine an existing process and break it down into its smallest, most granular components. They map it out. Often they use storyboarding techniques to visually depict the entire system from the moment it starts to the moment it finishes.
Like drawing out the exact journey of a defective product being returned by a customer, tracking every single person who touches it and every form that gets filled out. The goal here is to spot the obvious glaring redundancies before you ever even touch a line of software code.
Exactly. Yeah. Once you have a clean visual design, you move to step 2, modeling. This is where the physical map is translated into a technical format. Managers input the specific variables into the process. They create complex flowcharts that dictate the sequence of operations and explicitly define the decision points. For example, if the returned item is damaged, route it to warehouse B. If it is unopened, route it back to retail stock.
And here is where the software actually comes in. The text states that this flowchart model is written into the BPM software using a specific coding language called BPEL, which stands for Business Processes Execution Language.
BPEL is the crucial translation layer. It takes human logic and turns it into executable machine commands.
Which leads directly to step 3, execution. The newly coded process is run through a BPE engine. I want to clarify this term because when I hear engine, I think of a car part. What is a BPE engine actually doing? It's not just a static diagram sitting on the screen, right?
Not at all. The BPL engine is the active software environment that actually runs the logic in real time. It acts like a digital traffic cop. When a customer initiates a return, the BPL engine actively routes the digital paperwork to the right department, triggers the automated emails, and enforces the rules of the flowchart.
So it's actively managing the flow.
Yes. It also allows managers to run simulations. They can push hypothetical data through the engine to see how the logic holds up under stress before deploying it live.
Which is brilliant because you don't want to find out your new system is broken during the busiest day of the year. So the engine is running, the traffic cop is directing the data. That requires step 4, monitoring.
Yes, while the BPL engine executes the process, managers utilize a dashboard called BAM Business Activity Monitoring. BAM acts as a real-time diagnostic tool. It tracks every component of the process as it happens.
So if a manager is watching the BAM dashboard, they can literally see a backlog forming. Like if step 3, inspecting the returned item, takes 2 minutes, but step 4, processing the refund to the credit card, is suddenly taking 45 minutes and thousands of requests are piling up, the BAM dashboard flags it immediately. You found your bottleneck.
And finding the bottleneck allows you to execute step 5, optimization. This is the critical feedback loop that makes BPM valuable. You identify the slowdown in step 4 during the monitoring phase. Now you investigate why the credit card processing is slow, you adapt the process to fix it, you update the BPEL code, and then you rerun the execution.
So it just keeps looping.
Right. BPM is not a one-time fix. It is a philosophy of continuous incremental improvement.
So that is how you manage an ongoing process. But the text pivots to a completely different framework for managing a project. What is the fundamental difference?
Unlike a continuous process, a project has a very specific, defined starting point, a rigid ending point, and a specific set of deliverables. Building a new headquarters is a project. Designing a brand new software application is a project. Upgrading the company's servers is a project. Once the goal is achieved and the deliverables are handed over, the project ceases to exist.
Okay, so once a new smartphone is designed and hits the market, the project of designing it is over and the process of manufacturing and selling it begins.
Exactly. And because a project is temporary and highly complex, it requires different visualization and tracking tools. The most famous, and frankly still the most vital tool in project management software, is the Gantt chart. It was developed by an engineer named Henry Gantt in the early 20th century. It is essentially a horizontal bar chart that visually maps a project schedule against a calendar.
Okay, I have to push back here. Henry Gantt invented this chart around 1910. We are talking about an era of artificial intelligence, neural networks, and massive predictive databases. You're telling me that in 2026, modern project managers are still relying on a horizontal bar chart that was invented before the zipper.
I am telling you exactly that, and there is a brilliant, highly mathematical reason why. The Gantt chart elegantly solves one of the most complex logistical problems in human coordination, visualizing concurrent versus dependent tasks and identifying the critical paths.
Break that down for me. Concurrent versus dependent?
In any massive project, hundreds of tasks must be completed. Some of those tasks are concurrent, meaning they can happen at the exact same time without interfering with each other. If you are building a house, the electricians can be wiring the upstairs bedrooms while the plumbers are installing pipes in the basement. They are concurrent.
Got it. They don't block each other.
But other tasks are dependent. They absolutely cannot start until a previous task is entirely finished. You cannot pour the concrete foundation until the excavators have finished digging the hole. The concrete pouring is dependent on the excavation.
And the Gantt chart visualizes all of this.
Yes, the horizontal bars show exactly how long each task should take. But more importantly, modern project management software draws rigid, logical links between the dependent bars. This creates what is known as the critical path, the longest sequence of dependent tasks that dictates the absolute minimum time required to finish the whole project.
I see the power of that now. If an electrician gets delayed by 3 days, it might not matter if their task is concurrent. But if the excavation crew gets delayed by 3 days, it pushes the concrete pour back 3 days, which pushes the framing back, which pushes the entire project delivery date back. The Gantt chart instantly visualizes the devastating ripple effect of a single delay on the critical path.
Which is why the digital cloud-based Gantt chart is the beating heart of the 4 phases of the project management process outlined in the text.
Let's walk through those 4 phases quickly. Phase 1 is initiation.
This is the foundational groundwork. Before anyone does any actual work, leadership identifies the core goals. Why are we doing this project? They conduct a feasibility study to determine if the company even has the resources to accomplish it. They define the rigid scope of the project so it doesn't balloon out of control, create a rough timeline, identify all key stakeholders, and formalize it all in a statement of work.
Phase 2 is planning. This is where you get into the granular weeds. You take the massive project and break it down into hundreds of tiny component parts. This is where the project manager actually builds that massive Gantt chart, estimating the time for every single task and establishing the dependencies. They also finalize the exact budget and schedule when specific resources like specialized labor or raw materials need to arrive on site.
Phase 3 is execution. In a perfect world where the planning was flawless, this phase is smooth. But realistically, projects never go perfectly according to plan. Execution is largely about monitoring progress, managing teams, and dealing with unforeseen contingencies.
And this is where the digital Gantt chart software really shines, isn't it? If a massive storm delays the delivery of steel beams by a week, the project manager just updates that single task in the software, and the system instantly recalculates every single dependent task, redraws the critical path, and shows the manager the new delayed reality of the final delivery date.
It allows the manager to react mathematically rather than emotionally. And finally, we reach phase 4, closure.
The project is done. The new software is launched or the building is built. But the text makes it clear that closure isn't just about popping champagne and walking away.
Far from it. A formal closure process is vital for organizational learning. The project manager must conduct a rigorous review of the team's performance against the original budget and timeline. They must document the lessons learned, what went wrong and why, and store that data in the DBMS so future projects don't make the same mistakes.
Building up that institutional knowledge.
Right. They review the final deliverables with the stakeholders to ensure all expectations were met, and they systematically terminate all associated vendor contracts.
Yeah.
If you don't formally close a project, the administrative bleed can last for months.
It's a rigorous, almost exhaustive methodology, but when you are dealing with millions of dollars and hundreds of employees, it's really the only way to keep a complex endeavor from spiraling into total chaos.
All right, we have reached the final major conceptual block segment, the final phase of our deep dive today. We need to talk about how a manager actually makes sense of all this interconnected data. We're looking at business intelligence, big data, and the rapidly growing impact of artificial intelligence.
The transition into this topic is crucial because the sheer volume of data generated by the HR systems, the inventory scanners, the CRM profiles, and the BPM monitors is staggering. The acceleration of database growth in modern business is just exponential. If a manager had to manually sift through all that raw data to find a strategic insight, it would be paralyzed. The source material is very careful to define three distinct but deeply related terms that people often use interchangeably: data science, big data analytics, and business intelligence. I want to make sure we separate those out clearly for everyone listening.
Let's define the boundaries. Data science is the foundational academic discipline. It is the use of advanced mathematics, statistics, and computer programming to figure out how to gather, store, and securely search massive data sets. It is the underlying theory of data management.
Okay, so data science is the theory. Then we have big data analytics.
Big data analytics refers to the actual applied technology and processes used to sift through those massive, unstructured databases to extract usable information. It's the engine that mines the data to find hidden patterns.
Which brings us to business intelligence, or BI. This is the term managers will actually interact with daily. BI refers to the actual software platforms, the dashboards and interfaces that utilize data mining and predictive analytics to help managers make faster, highly informed decisions. BI takes the complex math of big data analytics and presents it in a way a business leader can actually understand.
But the textbook makes a profoundly important point regarding the nuance of modern business intelligence. It is vital that managers understand that BI is not a magic crystal ball that spits out a single absolute guarantee of the future.
Right. It doesn't just say, if you open a store in Dallas, you will definitely make $10 million. Modern BI provides a probability. It provides a confidence level or an error rate.
Exactly. The BI dashboard might analyze 10 years of demographic data, real estate prices, and competitor density and tell the manager, based on the current inputs, there's an 82% likelihood that expanding into the Dallas market will yield a 10% profit margin within 24 months. However, there is a margin of error of plus or minus 4%.
And knowing that degree of likelihood, knowing the mathematical margin of error, is what allows the manager to build intelligent contingency plans. It doesn't eliminate risk, but it quantifies the risk so you can prepare for it.
But there is a massive caveat to all of this brilliant analytical power, and it is a rule as old as computing itself. GI go. Garbage in, garbage out.
I'm struggling to see how that happens in a modern system, though. If the software is so advanced, how does the garbage get in?
Because humans are the ones inputting the baseline data. If a salesperson is tired and enters the wrong customer demographics, or if an inventory clerk skips a scanning protocol because they are in a rush, that corrupted data enters the DBMS. If the foundational data is bad, the beautifully formatted, mathematically rigorous BI output is completely dangerously worthless.
Oh, wow.
It will confidently recommend the wrong strategy because it is basing its math on a lie.
Which means the implementation strategy, like how you force your employees to use the system, is arguably more important than the software itself. The text points out that if a BI system is incredibly complex and has a massive, frustrating learning curve, employees will naturally try to find workarounds. They will enter data incorrectly just to get the screen to close, or they will skip steps entirely.
Therefore, a strategic manager should prioritize software that has a low friction of adoption. If your entire accounting department has used Intuit QuickBooks for the last 5 years and they are comfortable with the interface, choosing an Intuit-based BI tool is a really smart move. The familiarity reduces the friction, which drastically reduces the human error rate, which ensures your data remains clean.
And how that clean data is ultimately displayed matters immensely. Visualization tools, specifically digital dashboards, are the final critical bridge between the software and the human brain. If a manager logs in and is presented with a spreadsheet containing 40,000 rows of numbers, they learn absolutely nothing. If they cannot quickly read and interpret the data visually, the entire multi-million-dollar big data apparatus provides zero actual business value. The dashboard has to translate the complex statistical math into a clear visual narrative, like a color-coded map or a real-time trend line.
And that critical translation process, taking vast amounts of data and turning it into immediate, actionable insight, is increasingly being taken over by artificial intelligence. We cannot discuss business management systems in 2026 without acknowledging how AI is fundamentally rewiring everything we just talked about.
Let's dive into that, because AI is definitely moving from a buzzword to an operational necessity. Let's look at how AI is transforming business process management. The text introduces a concept called process intelligence, or PI.
We discussed earlier how traditional BPM requires human analysts to manually design flowcharts, monitor the BAM dashboards, and hunt for bottlenecks. It's a very manual, deliberate process. Process intelligence is the fusion of that BPM infrastructure with advanced machine learning.
So what does that actually look like in practice? How is it different?
PI constantly runs silently in the background of the company's network. It analyzes the digital footprints of every employee in every automated system. It uses machine learning to independently identify redundant steps, hidden bottlenecks, and inefficient workflows that human managers can't even see, all without interrupting the existing work.
That's crazy.
Right. It doesn't wait for a manager to run a test. It proactively flags a problem and suggests the optimized solution.
That is wild. It's essentially a system that constantly audits and improves itself. AI is also completely revolutionizing supply chain and inventory management. We talked about how traditional systems calculate lead times and set reorder points based on historical sales data.
But historical data only tells you what happened yesterday. AI attempts to predict what will happen tomorrow. The text discusses how AI processes vast, constantly shifting, seemingly unrelated inputs. Real-time global demand anticipation, complex intermodal shipping coordination, geopolitical instability, and even long-range weather predictions.
Wait, weather predictions? How does that factor into inventory?
Imagine a massive retail chain. An AI supply chain system can analyze meteorological data and predict that a severe, prolonged winter storm is going to hit the Northeast region in exactly 14 days.
So before the storm even forms, the AI system automatically routes extra shipments of snow shovels, ice melt, and heavy coats to the specific distribution centers in the Northeast, while simultaneously diverting summer inventory to the South.
Exactly. Inventory managers use AI-driven tools called Multi-Echelon Inventory Optimization, or AEO. MEIO analyzes data across the entire global supply chain in real time. It dynamically adjusts the stock levels of millions of individual SKUs based on seasonal fluctuations, sudden consumer behavioral shifts, and external disruptions far faster and infinitely more accurately than any team of humans using traditional databases ever could. It turns the supply chain into a living, reacting organism.
And across general business management systems, we are seeing AI deployed in highly practical, labor-saving ways too. The text notes that AI-enabled chatbots are now sophisticated enough to handle the vast majority of routine HR inquiries, like an employee asking how many vacation days they have left and basic customer service returns in real time, soup and 100/7. This frees up the human HR staff to focus on complex employee relations issues that require actual empathy.
And we cannot forget cybersecurity. The network is under constant attack. AI systems are continuously analyzing network traffic, establishing a baseline of normal behavior. The moment an automated security threat attempts to breach the system, or an internal user acts maliciously and attempts to download a massive database at 3:00 a.m., the AI identifies the anomaly and locks the system down in milliseconds, long before a human IT security guard would even notice the alarm.
It fundamentally shifts the entire role of the manager. For decades, a manager's job was to process data and enforce processes. As AI increasingly automates the routine processes and crunches the heavy analytics, human managers are freed up to focus on what humans are actually good at: strategic long-term planning, building relationships, negotiating complex deals, and handling the nuanced, ethical, and emotional issues that require a human touch.
It's a total paradigm shift. The manager is no longer the calculator. The manager is the visionary directing the calculator.
Which brings us perfectly back to the metaphor we started with at the very beginning of this deep dive. The network brings the massive flood of data in, but the business management system, the DBMS, the predictive models, the decision-making software, increasingly powered by relentless artificial intelligence, is the brain that helps the human mind actually make sense of it all. Understanding these systems, from the absolute foundational necessity of clean data in a DBMS to the terrifying complexities of legally compliant HR software, automated global inventory, critical project paths, and AI-driven business intelligence, is exactly what separates a standard employee from a strategic business leader. You have to understand how the machine works if you ever want to be the one driving it.
It is entirely about seeing the interconnectedness of all these disparate systems. A true leader understands how a sudden shift in global supply chain data affects inventory, which affects the profitability of the CRM's marketing campaign, which ultimately dictates whether HR needs to hire more staff or initiate layoffs. The business management system is the central nervous system that connects all those dots.
This has been an incredibly dense, fascinating exploration of the material. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Module 7. As we wrap up, a quick reminder, please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and share this audio with your classmates or colleagues. And we specifically want to point you to the comments section right now because we have an engaging discussion question that we want you to answer based on everything we just unpacked.
We really want you to apply this theoretical framework to reality.
Here is the question for the comments. Think about a small local business that you frequent in your own town. It could be a local coffee shop, a boutique clothing store, a specialized auto mechanic, or even a specialized service, like the Patio furniture store we discussed earlier. If the owner of that specific business came into a small windfall of cash and had the budget to implement just one of the major software systems we discussed today, a robust customer relationship management system, an advanced automated inventory management system, or a comprehensive human resources management platform, which one do you think would give them the biggest immediate boost in efficiency and profitability, and why? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to defend your choice based on the specific nature of the business you chose.
I am genuinely looking forward to reading the rationales. There is absolutely no single right answer to this. It depends entirely on the unique pain points and operational realities of the business you select.
And as a quick sneak peek to keep you looking forward to the next module next time, we are taking a deep dive into Module 8, Social Media. We are going to explore how platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn have evolved far beyond just sharing photos with friends. They are functioning as massive, powerful, highly complex business ecosystems that drive a significant portion of modern global commerce. You definitely won't want to miss it. So, the next time you browse for a pair of hiking boots online and see an ad follow you relentlessly across the internet, don't just brush it off as a digital footprint. Think of the massive, complex, AI-driven business management system working furiously in the background, capturing your data, running thousands of predictive analytics, and executing a targeted marketing strategy all in the blink of an eye. Until next time, keep managing the future.